Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome moderator Michelle Giuda, Executive Vice President of Geopolitical Strategy and Risk at Weber Shandwick, and our esteemed panel.
All right, good morning, everybody. We're going from football to 5G now. I'm Michelle Giuda. I'm head of Geopolitical Strategy and Risk at Weber Shandwick. Very pleased to be joined today by Tony Lewis, virtually. He's Region Vice President of State Public Policy and Government Affairs for Verizon. And then Tom Simpson, here with us. He's Chief Operating Officer of altafiber, previously known as Cincinnati Bell, now altafiber. But really glad to have you today, and you too, Tony, for an important conversation around enhancing connectivity in the United States through 5G. And just three things quickly to set the context for this conversation. First, from a global perspective, 5G is expected to be the fastest deployed mobile communication technology in history, covering 75% of the world's population within the next 5 years. From a US perspective, 5G is becoming an even more integral part of our national infrastructure as the country invests more than $1 trillion in infrastructure modernization. And then finally, from a geopolitical perspective, 5G is a new battleground as countries across the world look to control digitalization across the industries that are going to define our future, whether it's transport, biotechnology, smart cities, robotics, and then quantum computing. So 5G is really high stakes. And glad that we're here today to have a conversation. I'm really eager to speak with both of you to discuss the potential for 5G in the US from a connectivity standpoint, as well as a competitiveness standpoint. So let me get started with a question for both of you. We hear so much about the power of 5G, and we'll start with you, Tom. In what ways can 5G and fiber optic networks be harnessed to address digital divides, economic challenges, as well as open up a new era of opportunity here in the United States?
That's a great question. Ultimately, communications is like any other infrastructure, and that infrastructure is going to provide bridges to communities. And if those bridges are equal and bring equity, so if you can bring training and knowledge to knowledge workers, communities can actually spread into more rural areas. If you can bring that same training and infrastructure to a business, businesses can expand in untold ways. And it lowers the boundaries to economic expansion across the great divide that exists between urban and rural America now.
And what about you, Tony, from your perspective at Verizon? What's the opportunity of 5G? How can it address some big economic and social challenges, as well as open up new opportunities?
Well, thank you so much for the question, and I agree with Tom. When you think about what 5G enables, Michelle, you talked about speed and speed to market and the ability to build these networks. This is wireless. You know, in the past, we've had to run individual wires, whether that was copper, coaxial cable, or a fiber to a home, to a building, to a place in order to facilitate that connectivity. Now you have a wireless solution that literally brings the kind of speed, the kind of low latency, and the kind of opportunities through a wireless connection. So anyone can mount this box, this router in their home, in their business, at their school, and receive the kind of connectivity that would have taken days and sometimes weeks in the past to get there. That's point number one. Point number two is it does equal the playing field, the opportunity for everyone who has a need to have some level of connectivity, whether that's for education, medical purposes, of course, gaming and playing, but more importantly, to fulfill whatever needs you have as an individual is now available, and it's available easily to these folks.
So there's this big opportunity now to bridge divides, to open up new economic opportunities. What's it going to take to get there? What are the necessary steps? What are the required policies in order for broadband connectivity networks to reach this potential, their full potential, over the course of the next 5 years? Tom?
Great question. It's all about speed. Ultimately, as Tony mentioned, that the wireless solution with 5G is great because it does provide that last feet from the nearest transmitter to the location. So it takes a step out of the process, but you still have to have a deep network into neighborhoods and into communities. And That network requires access to roadways, access to conduit, access to pole routes. And it's largely a construction project, just like anything else. It can be equal to replacing pipes in a city. It can be equal to replacing electrical grids. This is a project of that scale, and it has to pass hundreds of thousands and hundreds of millions of households throughout the U.S. to be effective. So for any state, federal, local government, it's aligning policies to make sure that you can actually provide equal access to everybody and speed up that access to build across that right of way.
Tony.
Yeah, I agree. And it's all about partnerships, right? So Tom's explained it. We have to lay fiber mile after fiber mile after fiber mile to make this work. And cities and counties and towns and hamlets and states have to work with us. They have to recognize, and I will tell you, we have seen them recognize this through the unfortunate events of COVID-19, that you have to accelerate the ability to build that infrastructure, to get these opportunities to those who need it most. And so it's those partnerships that are key. We are all willing and able to get the right permit for the right opportunity to build, but the permitting systems that were in place weren't put in place to build fiber. They were put in place to build buildings or to run water infrastructure. Really, really old. We need to advance those opportunities with our partners in cities and states to allow us to help them achieve our ultimate goal, and that is getting broadband equally to every member of society.
So we're talking a lot about speed, we're talking a lot about partnerships and bridging into new areas. So Tom, as part of the company's operating expansion, altafiber recently announced some new partnerships, one in Greene County, Ohio, one with the city of Greendale in Indiana. What are the goals envisioned there? And how are you going to continue to expand your reach and speed? You talked about hundreds of millions of households. How are you going to continue to do that and invest in your fiber network?
That's a great question, and Tony touched on it. It's the permitting system at a national level is very antiquated. The conditions to access conduits and poles and things like that is still a very manual process. So helping constituents at a municipality level, at a county level, and a city level understand that when we build a terrestrial network that Verizon might be a customer of, or any other provider is a customer of, including the residents themselves, ultimately we're building past every household and every address in a county, on a county by county basis. And it does take a public partnership with a municipality that is willing to help us accelerate those things. And that happens nationally at a county level. There are in the great state of Kentucky alone, there are over 100 counties, and that is a lot of rural access to deal with at a county by county level.
And Tony, Verizon also focused on some expansion. Verizon recently announced spectrum expansion plans to cover various underserved locations throughout the U.S. One, does that include Kentucky? We're all here in Kentucky. And then how will you leverage your existing infrastructure to accelerate that deployment? And where do you aim to be most impactful?
Yeah, absolutely. It includes Kentucky. We've had a great partnership with Louisville, and we'll continue to expand that across the state and across the United States. And that's what we're most proud of, is those partnerships. We have worked with cities for 100 years. We're a very old company that became Verizon in 2000, accelerated over the last 2 decades into this technology company we are today. And we did that because we embraced partnerships and looking for opportunities to work with our partners, our cities, our fiber providers, like Tom, IBM, Google, New York Times, Disney, you name it. All of these great companies we work with in order to facilitate the opportunities for those who need it most. And so let's talk about that for a second. When you think about the things that we're most proud of here at Verizon, we think about Verizon Innovative Learning Schools. Those schools are all over the great state of Kentucky. And what are we doing? We're putting in 5G labs to enable young people, and we heard from some marvelous students earlier today, to help them understand what capabilities exist when you have what we call the ultimate connectivity, when every device talks to every device, when a city wants to eliminate traffic fatalities, when they want to make sure that when I cross the street in Washington, D.C., a car doesn't hit me. You think about connectivity, connecting streetlights to cars that are already connected, to other sensors around the streets. The opportunities are limitless when you have that level of network built and ready for those smart people to come over the top and start building applications. Remember what happened with 4G. It came on board, and what are the kind of applications that came to fruition that we weren't aware of? Well, I can now summons a car to anywhere I am in the United States and it'll come pick me up. I can stay in a stranger's home. All those things I could have done in the past, but there was no platform to facilitate them. So the Ubers of the world and the Airbnbs of the world became commonplace. So what's next? 5G is going to usher in all types of applications that will improve the lives of every citizen of every city and state. And all we need is smart folks getting involved, young people getting involved, making sure they have the opportunity to expand on those great ideas we know they already have.
Well, we're talking so much about partnerships, and digital connectivity sits right at that intersection of government and technology. What's so new about the types of partnerships that are required between public and private at this point? And what are the hurdles? Is it red tape? Is it just that we don't know what we don't know yet? But where are the hurdles when it comes to the new types of partnerships that are required now for 5G connectivity?
Also a good question. Ultimately, at a municipality level, when you look at the deployment of Verizon networks or competitors' networks or where we build fiber, there's always going to be access and even some economic hurdles. When we look at the federal infrastructure funds, there's funding going out at a state and a local level that municipalities have the ability to apply towards infrastructure. And one way to accelerate these things ultimately is matching grants with a partner. It could be us, it could be any other provider to accelerate deployment to ensure that you have 100% connectivity. The 5G or fiber, regardless of the technology medium, is meaningless if you don't have 100% connectivity. If, as we talked about earlier, if you imagine where we're at now, if the pandemic had happened 10 years ago, work from home, matriculation from home, those things would have been impossible. At least we had good enough broadband connectivity that we could have technologies like Zoom or as Tony stated, an Uber or DoorDash delivering goods. If you think about where we're at now, to get to where we need to be, you have to have that 100% connectivity so you can have untold access to technology and equalization.
And Tony, what are you seeing in the types of new partnerships that are required?
No, I appreciate that. And I'll go back to the beginning part of your question, which is, what do we think has gone wrong and what could be improved? And I think with our government partners, one of the things that we've observed is that, policy is written from the past and not into the future. And so helping them understand that, if we can partner together, if we can work together on policy, we can create the right policy. We're not against policy. We want progressive policy. We want policy that's going to help everybody move toward our collective goal. My customer is their constituent, right? I am a citizen of this city. And so I have no incentive to do anything that would do any harm to our citizens. But we can't move fast enough. And you said this in the beginning of the conversation, Michelle. We have to move fast in order to be the world leader. To move fast, you need a light touch. You need lots of conversation, and we need to be nimble and flexible with our policy in order to accelerate these great bills and then allow all the economic development that comes behind building, as Tom said, this highway, this complete connectivity. It will be a game changer for the economy of the United States.
So we've got just over a minute left. So final question for each of you as we talk about speed and the need for new partnerships from the government and from the private sector. What about individuals, and especially individuals in rural communities? We're here in Lexington, Kentucky. What can individuals do to help advance this next generation of 5G connectivity? And you talked a little bit, Tony, about youth getting involved. So we'll start with you.
Yeah, and I will start right there. We know the need, and we know that everybody understands what they can do when they have that connectivity. Lowering the bar for rules to build. The government's already helping us, as Tom said, with the kind of funds you need to build in some of the rural parts of the United States. That's taken place. And now what we need is folks to get involved. Call your local representatives, talk to them about what your needs are, make sure we're clear on that, and then use the technology that's available. There will be all types. It might be fiber, it might be coaxial, it might be wireless. Use what you have, and we'll continue to partner with all the companies that are needed and the government necessary to get this technology out to everybody in every part of the country, including rural.
All right, Tom, final word.
Exactly what Tony said.
Perfect, and we're ending right on time then. So big priority on speed and on partnerships in order to make sure that United States is connected through 5G. Tony, Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tony.